Hi everyone. My name is Z. I'm L2 from Malaysia, and today, in the hard skills track, I'll be talking about mistriggers. I hope it shall be a very happy discussion. Okay, so just a little bit more about myself first. I've been a judge since 2012. I've been an L2 since 2013, and most of you, if you all seen me before, I would be the artist behind the Judge Tokens project. Hopefully, fingers like crossed really hard that I get to do something for Dominaria, because events are coming back, and players need tokens and they need to be educated. Anyway, this is my Facebook profile picture. You can see I'm holding a poop scoop. That is because I have 5 cats. Before the presentation, would you all want to look at some cat pictures before we start? So yeah, here's some cat pictures. So the black ones, as you can see, they're all the boys. From left to right, they are Rudius, Roxas, and Faz. Behind here, this is their grandma, the matriarch Taco. And the 5th one is our newest one. Her name is Dani. So yeah, so those are my cats, and I am subservient to them. Right, now that we get that out of the way, let's talk about what we will be talking about in this presentation. Okay, so as you all know, my topic is mistriggers. So let's look at it from a tournament perspective. We shall refer to various documents, namely the MTR, the Judging at Regular, and the IPG, to take a closer look at what this infraction, this section is all about. And I hope we can have a bit of discussion. Everyone feel free to just if you have any opinions or anything you want to add, just feel free to just type them in the chat. And yes, my cats are very cute. Thanks, Alvin. All right, before we start, let's have a bit of hydration. Remember to drink water regularly. I hope you all have water ready. All right, so with that out of the way, let's look at mistriggers. Okay, the first document I would like to look at is the Magic Tournament rules. There's a section, if I'm not mistaken, 4.3, talking about mistriggers. Okay, it is a chunk of words, so I don't expect you to look through it. So what I'm going to do is, okay, let's look through this bit, okay, bit by bit. I'm going to highlight certain parts, and we shall discuss about the topic sentence by sentence. Right. The first one, okay. Players are expected to remember their own triggered abilities. Intentionally ignoring one is considered cheating. Cheating with a capital C has a specific definition in the IPG, and it will result in disqualification if a player is found capital C cheating. Okay, so of course that is generally true for any infraction that they'll make. If any player performs an infraction with an intention to gain an advantage, it is considered cheating, capital C cheating. So whatever we're going to talk about after this, we're just going to assume that it is accidental. Okay, kindly refrain from bringing up, what if the player means it? Okay, it is cheating, and if it's cheating, it is investigation. That is another topic by itself. So disclaimer aside, let's go on. Players are not required to point out the existence of triggered abilities that they do not control, though they may do so if they wish. This is one of the quirks I find about this game, that suddenly, you have a part of the game where you can just ignore, okay? And everything else, their players are expected to maintain the game state, as seen by the failure to maintain game state infractions. If your opponent does something wrong, you're supposed to point out. But triggers, you don't have to. So, like, in Arena, they would do it for you. So triggers are not going to be missed. But in real life, there is a possibility that players will miss triggers, either their own or their opponents. So for us judges, in order to to make a ruling fairly, we have to know, what is a trigger. Okay, so over here, our catch-all infraction here is game rule violation, of course, and mistriggers would be a specific subset of game rule violations. Okay, let's just quickly run through what are triggers. Okay, triggers, as you all know, there are certain keywords to look at. For example, whenever, when, and at, usually at the beginning of something. Okay, so if you want to figure out if something is a trigger, you just have to look at these words. On the other hand, how about game rule violation, though? As I mentioned just now, game rule violations are the catch-all, the broad term for anything, any mistakes that players do that are against the rules. Okay, so let's look at certain things that people usually people usually mistake for triggers. One of the big ones here is sagas. Sagas, yes, it has 3 triggered abilities. Okay. And yeah, so this one, this isn't the problem. The problem is this thing up here. Okay? As this saga enters and after you draw, add a law counter. If you look at the appropriate ruling for this one, you'll find out that sagas, this adding law counter thing is actually a turn action and not a trigger. Okay, so if a player forgets to put a law counter on the saga, it is not considered a mistrigger, but it is considered a game rule violation. Okay, so yeah, this one in particular. So and of course, if a player forgets to put a counter, the opponent has the responsibility to point it out. Okay, let's show us my next slide. Yeah, okay, I did quote the rule here. Hey, that one's 7. I actually didn't put any notes down. But yeah, anyway, the rule is actually this one, 505.4. Okay, this is a turn-based action that doesn't use a stack. If a player forgets about it, yeah, their opponent will have to point it out. And failing to do so is failure to maintain game state. So yeah, I was supposed to say that, yeah, this is the thing that you can't miss, but these, yeah, you can miss. But of course, if you remember to put a law counter on the saga, you shouldn't miss it. Hold on, sorry. Yeah, other things that are usually mistaken as mistriggers are replacement effects. Stranger things have happened before. Yes. Okay, replacement effects, like for example, this card, Grizzly Ghoul. But by the way, just in case if you haven't noticed, I'm only using cards from standard. So just give me a moment now. Okay. That one, I'll actually, Robin, thanks for your question. Robin's question is, what if a player triggers saga first before drawing? Let's say as a saga, they tutor first before drawing. About mishandling of triggers, we will talk about. Maybe we can talk about it later. I did reserve a section for what happens when players mishandle triggers. Yeah. So anyway, back to these. Like this one, Grizzly Ghoul. Enters the battlefield with a bottom counter on for each creature at its turn. It doesn't have the keywords that we expect to see, the whenever, when, or at. But instead, this is a replacement effect. It is not a trigger. And yes, players are responsible for reminding the opponent. Okay, not doing so will be, again, game rule violation and FTMGS. Yeah, so now that we've identified what is a trigger and whether it is something else, whether it can be missed or cannot be missed, let's move on to talk about the next part of this ruling here. Triggered abilities are considered to be forgotten by the controller once they have taken an action past the point where the triggered ability would have an observable impact on the game. Okay, again, this is a big chunk of text, so let's focus on the important part here, which is an observable impact on the game. What does this actually mean? Before I go on, I think, who is this? Chakris, is it? I think your mic is on. You have some noise back there. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, the keyword here is an observable impact on the game. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, over here we have to look at a few scenarios. Okay. The first scenario is when you have to choose a target, when a triggered ability goes on a stack, before it resolves, you have to choose the target. So for example, Luminac Aspirant, popular standard card. Popular standard card. Okay, so you must choose targets before the next pass priority. Okay, so maybe there might be a few at the beginning of your combat triggers happening at the same time. Maybe he has 3 Luminac aspirants. So before he passes priority, he will have to choose the targets for all 3 aspirants. Otherwise, it is considered missed. Anyway, right now, Giulietto asks, how about emblem triggers? Chandra Awaken Inferno, is it a GRV also? Let me just take a quick look at the text of Chandra Awakened Inferno. Huh? Chandra Awakened Inferno. Chandra Awakened Inferno emblem says, at the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you. If you missed it, well, you see the keyword here at the beginning, so it is a trigger. So if you missed it, your opponent is not obligated to voice it out. And since you're the one who created the emblem, you are the owner and you are responsible for the trigger. So anyway, yeah. So before the next, I think it's receive priority, not pass priority. Sorry, my mistake. So at the beginning of combat, before they receive priority during this step, they will need to choose their targets first. Choosing modes, like for example, Gala Greeters and the other one popular in standard, what's it called? Titan of Industry. Okay, you have modes to choose. So before they next receive priority, sorry, not pass priority, they will need to select what they have to do. Visible effects, okay, like for example, here are a few draft all-stars backup agent. It puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature. A +1/+1 counter is something visible. You need something to represent it. Inspiring Overseer, you gain 1 life. Life total changes are visible. You have to record it down somewhere, or at least spin your spin down die even. That is a visible change. Draw a card. Cards in your hand, cards in any zone are visible. Okay, if I have 2 cards and I have 3 cards, you can see the difference. Okay, tapping enchanted creature. Okay, doing something to the enchanted creature, like tapping it or moving it to another zone. Like let's say you destroy something. Okay, these are all visible changes. Creating tokens, creating a fish token, creating a treasure token. Okay, these are all visible changes. Okay, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so all these once actually backup token is not a very good example because it's target creature. But anyway, you imagine if says put a creature on itself. Okay, all these you have to immediately show awareness. Okay, before you do anything else, you have to say, okay, I'm gaining 1 life and I'm drawing a card. Yeah. So as you can see here, like for example, Inspiring Overseer, its trigger does two separate things. It gains you life and it draws you a card. Okay, so what happens if I draw one card, but I forgot to gain the life, or the other way around? I gain the life, but I forgot to draw a card. So is the trigger missed? In this case, the trigger is not considered missed, okay, because you did acknowledge the trigger. But what happens here is you have committed a game rule violation for not resolving the trigger properly. So I think if we go back to Robin's question here, what if players trigger Saga first before drawing? Let's say Urza Saga, they tutor first before drawing. Okay, so what is this case? Is it a missed trigger? They didn't miss any triggers. Okay, they know that there's going to be a trigger when a law counter is put on. Okay, so that is not considered a missed trigger. But in this case, it'll be considered a game rule violation. Okay, because you did a turn action at a time when you're not supposed to, which is the what's that? The draw step. Or even before draw step, the upkeep. Yeah, so you resolve that before you drew for the turn. Yeah, so you would have to do it during upkeep. So that would be a game rule violation instead. So these are visible effects. How about invisible effects? Okay, certain triggers, certain triggers, they change the rules of the game. For example, this is the flip side of inventive iteration. It says whenever you cast a spell, your opponents can't cast spells with the same mana value as a spell until your next turn. Okay, so when you resolve this trigger, okay, let's say you cast a spell with mana value 2, you have to acknowledge that this trigger exists. You have to mention it. You have to tell your opponent that, okay, this thing is triggered and you can't cast spells with the same mana value, with mana value 2. Okay, so this is so that you prevent illegal game states. Other examples of this is, for example, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this creature can't be blocked. Okay, so it changes the rules of the game. It makes this creature can't be blocked. So in order to prevent your opponent blocking the creature, you'll have to acknowledge it, say that, okay, this thing has triggered before any illegal game states happen, which is ideally immediately. Other types of invisible effects, like for example, my third favorite, common in Zendikar Rising draft. Okay, it gets, when this thing attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each creature in your party. Okay, so unlike Arena, there's not going to be something that's going to show up saying that, hey, this thing gets +2/+0. Okay, all these, especially all these power toughness changes. The other popular one is Exalted, like Noble Hierarch. Okay, you have to acknowledge it when it first matters. Okay, after you attack, like for example, when would this Grotech Bugcatcher, the power change matters? It matters when it should matter. I mean, generally, it should matter when it deals combat damage to the opponent. Like let's say, for example, if you have a party of 3, it attacks as a 4/2. So when it deals damage, your opponent says, how much do I take? You have to say take 4. If you say take 1, then your trigger is missed. But of course, you don't have to say, oh, this thing gets +3/+0 before it deals damage. You only have to say it when it first matters. Of course, if your opponent plays a fight spell when it's attacking, you know, or let's say if he casts a spell that says destroy all attacking creatures with power 4 or greater, can you say, oh no, it's not triggered? No, you can't. That would be cheating. Anyway, let's go on.
Z, just going to hijack for a few minutes.
Sure.
About the Chandra's Inferno emblem. I'm going to copy the relevant rules into the text chat. If anyone's interested in reading it, you can see the emblem is actually owned and controlled by the player that creates the emblem. So the opponent, so like I have the Chandra and I give Z emblem. Z is the controller and the owner of the emblem.
Gets an emblem, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, but for competitive RL, for mistrigger, we care about the person who created who is responsible for the existence of the object. So I'm going to copy I'm going to copy that relevant text as well. So it will still work the way that you think it does. The copy paste is a bit weird because I'm copying from the PDF. But yeah, basically, if it's my emblem for competitive RL, I am still responsible to remember it, even though if I give Z the emblem, Z is the owner and the controller, but I am still responsible for the triggers. Yes, sorry for the aside. Just want to make things clear a bit.
No, sorry. Thank you very much for the clarification. Yeah, so shall we continue? I've already drank water 3 times. I hope you have too. Next up in our definition, triggered abilities that are forgotten are not considered to have gone onto the stack. Okay, now we are splitting hairs a bit. Okay, yes, they have not gone onto the stack, but my question is, have they triggered? What is the difference here? Okay, let's take a look at an example. Welcoming Vampire, played in certain, I don't know, Naya Go White decks, says whenever one or more or other creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. All right, so we have our player Abba controlling this card. They create a 1/1 goblin token, but they didn't draw a card. Okay, blah, blah, blah. She does something. If they create another 1/1 goblin token later in this turn, can they say, oh, okay, I didn't draw it just now? Can I draw a card now? All right. What do you think? Can I get some responses? Okay. Yap says, yeah, I can draw a card. Jovian says can, sorry. Tommy says can. One turn cycle hasn't passed yet. Tommy says it's unintentional, so they get to, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, we assume that it is unintentional. So far, a lot of people say can. Reasons being, one says it's unintentional. Any other people want to give their reasons? Let's say we give this another 30 seconds. Lom says can. It's never triggered before, so the once per turn limit isn't counted yet. Okay. Chonglam says can. JC says can. All right. Shall I reveal the answer? Okay. The answer here is, okay, it's considered triggered, okay, but the trigger is missed. Okay. It is still triggered, it didn't go on the stack, but in terms of mistriggered, it is considered missed. Okay, so after triggering after missing the trigger once, and if the second goblin comes in, the trigger won't even, the ability won't even trigger. Okay, it's considered missed, and yeah, so you're not supposed to let the player draw a card. Okay, so this is one of the examples. Let's look at a more harsh example here. Okay, something that is a bit more dangerous. Our good friend Jin Cataxius. Okay, whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery spell, counter that spell, and this ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, so you imagine, you can, I guess you can imagine certain unscrupulous players that would conveniently forget triggers when it doesn't matter. And yeah, so even though it says triggers only once each turn, if you miss it for the first time, it wouldn't trigger. That's why if you look back at this thing, okay, it is not considered to have gone onto the stack, but it didn't say that it didn't trigger. Okay, so that is how you remember this part. Okay, so this is this. Other than this, there is another wording that appears only on 4 cards. This is one of them. Rivetier's Ascendancy says, whenever you sacrifice a creature, you may return target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Do this only once each turn. What does this "do this" actually refer to? If we look at the card rulings for this card, okay, do this here means whenever you sacrifice a creature, okay, it will always trigger. If you choose not to return the card, then it will still continue to trigger until you choose to return the target creature card. Okay. After you do that, it won't trigger for the rest of the turn. Okay, so it is slightly different from this. Okay, so this is, it will only trigger once. After that, it won't trigger. This is, you'll keep on triggering until you decide to do that. Until you decide to do this thing. Okay, final part of this definition from our MTR. How forgotten triggered abilities are subsequently handled is defined by the rules enforcement levels of the tournament. Okay, so in this case, we're going to have to refer to 2 separate documents for this. Okay, of course, the first one is the easier one is our judging at regular REL. See what I did there. But anyway, yeah, again, chunk of text. Some of it we have already looked at earlier, so let's not look at it. Okay, still a pretty big chunk of text. Let's break it down. Jar says, if the ability includes the word may, assume the player chose not to perform it. Okay, so that is easily handled. For example, my favorite card here, those of you who know Legion Angel. It says, when Legion Angel enters the battlefield, you may reveal a card you own named Legion Angel from outside the game and put it in your hand. If you didn't do that, then it is considered that, yeah, I don't have any because Z bought them all. Papercraft Decoy says, okay, when it leaves the battlefield, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. And if you missed it, we just take it that, you forgot to pay 2, even though you might have the mana. Yeah. Otherwise, okay, you can choose to put the ability onto the stack unless you think it would have been too disruptive. Okay, don't add it to the stack if significant decisions have been made based on the effect not happening. Okay, for example, after you miss a trigger, the player continues to do many different actions, or or the turn has passed. The most tricky one is if a player has already drawn a card or something. Usually by then it's going to be a bit too disruptive to try to handle the situation. So in any case, we're still talking about regular anyway. So generally it is quite low risk, and you sort of get quite a bit of discretion whether you choose to put it on a stack or not. But of course, for the sake of customer service, generally, yeah, you can afford to be a bit more lenient. Let's look at a scenario here. This scenario, again, we have a very popular standard card. Okay, Aerosmith is playing against Nirvana. Aerosmith crews his Essegas Chariot and attacks with a chariot. Nirvana says no blocks. Aerosmith says, okay, you go to 16. Oh yeah, I should have created a cat just now. Okay, so what do you think? How will you handle this situation? Can I get a bit of responses? Okay, A says, yep, no token for you. Oh, anyone? What do you think? Yep. No token, visible, non-detrimental, no token. Yep. Okay. So this is generally quite straightforward. Okay. It is quite clear cut. Mistrigger. Earlier we've seen that it is a visible effect. And when he was supposed to acknowledge that it happened, meaning meaning when was that again? Yeah. Should have done it even before the defending player says anything about blocking. He should have put it down already. Miss, no attack happened, no token live by 20. No, sorry, Tommy, I'm saying that if he already crewed it and everything already, just that creating a cat is after the trigger. After the attack, sorry. Yeah. So let's look at a slightly different scenario. Okay, same thing. Our attacker here says, you go to 16, I create a cat. Slightly different here. What's the difference here then? Okay, like earlier on, they did say that they forgot to create a cat. Like, oh yeah, I should have done that. Okay, so that is clear mystery. But how about this one then? It's a slightly different scenario. What do you think might have happened here? What could the difference be? I would imagine if you ask this player a few more questions, they might have said, oh yeah, I hit him and I create a cat. You might find out that he might have thought first my line trigger happens before damage. Yep, correct. Like what Ben says, he probably thought that this thing happens on damage instead of when he attacks. Okay, so there is some sort of ambiguity there, but would it still be considered a mistrigger, or would you solve it some other way? Is this the same thing, or is it a totally different thing? Benny, yeah, this is we are still in regular REL, so okay, so over here right now we do see a few more responses. Some people, Nicholas, Ryan, I think Chong Lam earlier as well, would consider this out of order sequencing. I can't remember out of sequencing on top of my head. Yeah, Brighton thinks out of sequencing or order sequencing as well. It's true that you can look at it that way. I can't remember what OOS says on top of my head, but yeah, okay. Over here, we do get a bit of leeway that we can actually consider letting him resolve the trigger also, even though the player mistaken the timing of the trigger. And like Carlos says, yeah, it's also a good idea to remind our players that the creating a token happens before the damage. It should happen when it attacks. Okay, so in regular REL, education is key. So yeah, we can afford to be a bit more lenient. Okay, so that is the simpler document. Let's go on to the harder document, the IPG. What does the IPG say about missed penalty? As you all know, IPG is the document that governs how infractions should be given out in competitive level tournaments. And it says here, no penalty. This is sort of one of the most lenient infractions that you can have. Okay? So in general, this is no penalty. And once again, there is a chunk of text. I can tell that your eyes are glazing over already. You all don't care what it says. You all don't care about it so much that you probably don't even notice that I just flipped the text over and upside down. Okay. Anyway, we have already covered most of that already. So let's just focus on this particular part. Okay, judges do not intervene in a mistrigger situation unless they intend to issue a warning or have reason to suspect that the controller is intentionally missing their trigger abilities. So as we covered earlier, intentionally missing something, cheating. But what does it mean by issue a warning? Okay, if you look at it earlier, it says no penalty, right? So in what cases do you get to issue a warning? Okay, if we go back to this chunk of text. Oh, hi, Saran. Welcome back. Yeah, if we go back to this chunk of text, we will see that there is an upgrade path to this infraction. Okay, let's focus on the relevant part. If the trigger ability is usually considered detrimental for the controlling trigger, and they own the card responsible for the existence of the trigger, the penalty is upgraded to a warning. Let's look at some examples of detrimental triggers. Detrimental here means bad for you. Okay, Black Market Tycoon says, at the beginning of your upkeep, it deals 2 damage to you for each creature you control. Damage is ouch. Ouch is bad. Okay, so this is a detrimental trigger. Tenacious Underdog has Blitz, the Blitz ability. Okay, if you cast it for the Blitz cost, you have to sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. Okay, losing creatures, bad. So it is a detrimental trigger. So these are the more clear-cut cases. Okay, damage to you is bad. Yes, having to sacrifice a creature is bad as well. But what happens when we consider it, in general? Like, for example, Undead Butler. It enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. When it dies, yeah, you get to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Okay, the second one, no problem. Getting cards back, good. Card advantage, good. But how about the first one then? When it enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. Is this a detrimental trigger? Anybody wants to give your thing? Okay, Benny says it's not a detrimental trigger. Joven says it's not a detrimental trigger as well. Can we get, say, 5 more answers? Okay, no. Okay, 4 more answers. Tommy says no. Brighton says non-detrimental. JC, so noun, unless you're down to 3 cards. That is something I want to say also. Kenrick says no. Can I get 2 more answers? Ron says yes, detrimental because it's self-mill. Come on, 1 more. Kelvin says detrimental. I suppose your reasoning will be the same as Ron. Okay, the answer is yes, this is considered a detrimental trigger. Okay, milling cards, losing cards, bad. Okay, over here we don't care what the other abilities do. Okay, even though, yeah, okay, even though after milling the card, you have more chances of getting it back, but that is a later story. Okay, so this is considered detrimental because you mill cards, you lose cards, bad. How about this one? Slightly complicated, a bit more complicated. The trigger says, whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player creates a blood token. Is this a detrimental trigger? What do you think? More blood tokens your opponent have, it is bigger. Okay, Giulietto says no. Kelvin says no. John Patrick says detrimental. JC, yes. Benny says detrimental. Can I have 3 more answers before we... Okay, Michael says yes, yes, yes. Oh, a lot says yes. Brighton says yes. Arif says yes. Chester says yes. And the answer is yes. You are correct to say that it is detrimental. Giving stuff to your opponent, bad. Even though, yes, when it attacks, it can grow very, very big. Okay, like if we look at the earlier case, okay, if you look at the earlier case, even though the next ability might benefit of this detrimental ability, we will still consider this bad. In any case, if you look at, Black Market Tycoon, why would this, if we consider the effects of other abilities or other cards, you can somehow find a way to think that, oh, damage to myself, that's good. I'm going to hit myself down to 0 with a Platinum Angel in play, and I'm going to swap it with Soul Conduit, and so on and so on. Okay, so when we look at detrimental triggers, we would just look at the ability itself. Let's look at another example that might be able to show this clearer. This is Dark Confidant. It's the only non-standard card in my presentation, and this is why I give this, because this is the classic example. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. So in the same trigger, okay, it gives you cards, but at the same time, you lose life. Okay, so we have established getting cards, good. Losing life, bad. Is this a detrimental trigger? Oh, Chong Lam in very strong words. No, getting cards, good. Okay, Tommy says yes, detrimental. JC says yes. Can I get 2 more answers? Eric says yes. Yep says depends on context. Eric says no, yes, no, yeah. Okay. All right, so the answer is Dark Confidant here is considered not detrimental trigger. Before we go on, okay, we notice that I use detrimental and non-detrimental. Okay, there's no such thing as a beneficial trigger. Okay, it is either detrimental or non-detrimental. Okay, we don't care if it's beneficial. We only care if it's bad. Okay, it's just bad or not bad. Okay. Anyway, why do we consider this as a non-detrimental trigger? Another way we can look at whether a detrimental trigger or not is, if let's say we take this entire chunk out, if we take out this entire trigger out, okay, what's left of it? Dark Confidant will just be a 2 mana 2/1. Okay, are you going to play a 2 mana 2/1? I don't think so. Okay, so you see, if you take out this trigger, then the card suddenly becomes worse. Okay, that's how you consider it as a non-detrimental trigger. So if you look back at the triggered examples, Black Market Tycoon, if you take out this thing, 2 mana 2/2 tap, create treasure token, suddenly the card becomes so much better. So that's how we see that it is a detrimental trigger. Same goes with this. Die, you can return a card to your hand. It makes the card better. But Vile Purveyor, 4 mana 5/6 flying trample when the attack gets bigger. So good. Okay, so that's how we can also see that. Okay, this is a detrimental trigger, and of course, like as mentioned earlier, if you take this one out, the card becomes very, very lackluster. So we would say that this is a non-detrimental trigger. So like Brighton just mentioned here, however, if you miss it at a low life total, you can investigate for cheating. Yeah. So you imagine if a player, 20 life, cast this on turn 2, draw cards, until it has 1 life suddenly. I just went to draw. I didn't trigger this. Okay. That would be grounds, very solid grounds to investigate for cheating. And I think that's the only time cheating will be mentioned here. Okay. Yap also said that, okay, what do you call that? Earlier, depends on the situation. According to the upgrade, we don't consider the current game state in determining whether a trigger is detrimental or not. Okay, so doesn't matter if that player is at one life or 1,000 life, it is still a non-detrimental trigger. But you have to investigate it in certain ways. Finally, symmetrical abilities may be considered usually detrimental or not, depending on who is being affected. One of the examples here is Howling Mine. So I have to put in Howling Mine. Okay. At the beginning of each player's draw step, the Howling Mine is untapped. The player draws an additional card. If you miss it for yourself, I'm supposed to get cards. That's a good thing. Okay. And if I miss it, too bad, nothing happened. But on my opponent's turn though, he's supposed to get cards. And like when we like how we seen earlier, the blood vial purveyor, giving your opponent's card, bad. Okay, for your opponent, this will be considered a detrimental trigger. So if your opponent misses it, you have to get a warning. But if you miss it, too bad. Rolling a Vortex would be the opposite. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, it deals 1 damage to them. You miss it for yourself, damage is bad. And you missed it, trigger, not trigger, warning. Your opponent missed it, too bad. I think this should be the last section of my thing. Okay, remedy. Still copying from the chunk of text. If the trigger ability is an enter the battlefield trigger of an aura that affects only the enchanted permanent and causes a visible change to the permanent, resolve the ability immediately. Example, Charm Sleep. Enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Okay, so it is a trigger ability that affects only this permanent and causes a visible change. So we will just resolve it. Okay, it doesn't matter how many turns have passed. If 5 turns later, someone realized, oh, this guy has been sitting there untapped for 5 turns, it is considered missed back then, but you still get to fix it. What happens with Sleep to the Fishes though? Sleep with the Fishes. Still same trigger.
It's not digital artists, but established artists. Sensor.
Sorry, who was that? Anyway, as I was saying, Sleep with the Fishes, same thing, but this time you create a 1/1 blue fish. Okay. Would the remedy be the same then? Okay. Once again, it affects only the enchanted permanent, causes a change to a permanent. Yeah. So is this considered, can you remedy it the same way if you missed it? What do you think? Is it going to be the same? No worries, Ian. Same, but no token. No, as in you don't get anything at all. No remedy here. Yeah, okay. So in this case, I don't think the partial fix, is that even partial fix in Mistrigger? I can't remember. Yeah. The partial fix shouldn't apply. It's either you resolve the whole thing or you just don't do it at all. Yeah. So no fish, no tap. Okay, if the trigger ability, blah, 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 words, let's look at the part. Let's look at this. Let's look at the interesting part here. This trigger ability undoes a zone change caused by the effect that created the delayed trigger ability. Okay, so meaning you move something to one zone, then you move that zone away, and then you move that thing away from the zone. Usually, that it is something like, hey, I create this and I sacrifice it at the beginning of the next step. Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, pretty powerful card if it stays flipped. Okay. Yeah, so it is referring to this. Generally, it refers to, let's say, I put something in, later I sacrifice it or I exile it, like Kiki-Jiki, what's that? Sneak Attack, Geist of Saintraft, Ghost Council of Obzedat, all these. Okay, so again, if they are not supposed to be there, doesn't matter how many turns have passed, you just remove it. Okay, so these are the remedies that do so-called do not expire. If you notice that okay, this should have been done, doesn't matter how many turns ago, you have to do it anyway. I don't know why I put this in. Ignore this slide. Chunk of text. How about any other cases? Let's look at the part. Okay, the opponent chooses whether the trigger ability is added to the stack. Okay. So if you miss a trigger ability, your opponent actually does have quite a lot of say in how you do it. Okay, first of all, they can choose not to remind you. Secondly, even if you remember it, your opponent gets to choose where the trigger ability is added to the stack. Okay, and for everything else, if the ability was missed, one turn later, just instruct the players to continue playing, and if the trigger ability creates an effect whose duration has already expired, like for example, it gets +1/+1 until end of combat, and combat has already passed, instruct the players to continue playing. Ron says, I think there's a choice for opponent on whether to resolve the zone change trigger thing. Yes, I think so. Let's look at it. I might have skipped it. Yes. The opponent chooses whether to resolve the ability the next time a player would get priority, or when the player will get, or during the next phase. Yeah. So your opponent has a choice. Yeah. So you don't have a surprise blocker. Yeah. I did want to create this, revisit this scenario again, but I think earlier from what we have seen, yeah, in regular and in competitive, you would still treat the same way it is mistriggered. Somehow I thought that, yeah, you in regular, you can actually let the player get the trigger back. But of course, that is your discretion. Like in competitive, generally we don't. So yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Thank you very much. Questions? I don't know if there's any questions. I mean, yeah, that's all I have.
Any questions for Z? Thank you so much, Z.
Has questions, yeah. Sorry, I'm very awkward. I'm always very awkward.
You're fine. Presenting in the office.
Nonsense. You're not awkward. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I have like 5 minutes.
We have 6 more minutes. Do you guys have any questions for Z? Just leave them in the chat, and we can have Z address them over the next 6 minutes.
In the meantime, let's just go back to looking at my cats.
Z, I think you have a question from Arif.
Sorry, Arif, is Kiki Jiki case same with, for example, forgetting to put the permanent back from Flicker Wisp effect? Okay, so it is a zone change. Earlier on is a zone change. Yes, you move it from battlefield to exile. It is a delayed trigger ability. Yes. And does it undo the zone change? Yes, you move it back from exile to battlefield. So yes, the Kiki Jiki case sounds, the Flicker Wisp case sounds the same as the Kiki Jiki case. Well, okay, Carl, so let's see, Jovian, if a player forgot to trigger wedding announcement, is it mistrigger and no counter? Let's look at wedding announcement. Wedding announcement says, at the beginning of end step, put an invitation counter on wedding announcement. If you take blah, 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 blah. Okay, so the trigger here is at the beginning of an end step, you put a counter on it. So what is the thing that you will miss? You will miss putting the counter. Okay, so if you don't put any counter, then let's see. Where is mistrigger and no counter? Yeah, so if you miss a trigger, that means you don't even put the counter. So but if you put a counter, I would expect you to either draw a card or create a token. And if you put a counter and you don't do either of that, that will be considered what's that? GRV, like what we saw in Inspiring Overseer earlier. If you draw a card, didn't gain life, same thing. If you gain life, didn't draw a card, same thing. What are the usual misconception triggers that look non-detrimental but are actually detrimental? That we seen some earlier, like Undead Butler. You get the mill cards, then you get to get something back. The get something back doesn't matter. We just look at the part where you mill cards, it is detrimental. So yeah, basically things that will make you like lose life, lose cards, yeah, those are detrimental. Okay, Kendrick says, how about if a player A have Thalia that increases the cost of non-creature spells, the opponent didn't realize it and cast some non-creature spell, and actually he can't pay the extra costs. Valia says non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. None of the trigger keywords show up here, so that is not a miss trigger. We will just treat it as a GRV. You can't pay for the spell, and GRV over here, you can do rewinds. Is it called backups? Sorry. Is putting the counter on Wedding Archon considered a visible change? Can you see the counter? Yes, you can. It is a visible change. What's the classification of Bomat Courier's trigger ability right now? When I was looking at one of the articles, Bomat Courier 1, I would imagine it to be detrimental, but let me see if I can look at the what's that called? Let me just look at the article. Burger Saga Fix, I saw it mentioned it earlier. Anyway, meantime, I'm still looking for Ron's thing. But yeah, Robin, the fix is basically what happens is you just miss the trigger timing. You're supposed to trigger it at the main phase, but instead you triggered it at upkeep. So that is a game rule violation. Let's see. It is the game rule violation. So you will handle like a game rule violation. You will have to undo the thing. You have to back up and things. After draw. What do you mean after draw? Your question was before draw, isn't it? If somehow you tilted before you draw, if it's after you draw, then okay, that's when you're supposed to do it anyway. Yeah, so I was reading up on Undead Butler when I was doing this. It says here, the Bomat Courier exception. So apparently the Undead Butler doesn't count for the Bomat Courier exception. So somehow apparently Bomat Courier is an exception to this thing. Supposedly exile cards bad, but apparently Bomat Courier is exempted. Yeah. So okay. So it looks like my time is up, and thank you all for listening. If you have any feedback, please direct them to me or to the form. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see y'all when I see you. Bye.